a look at what happened.
It was a massive Secret Service failure.
A total breakdown in communication, a total lack of a cohesive, coherent, and competent security plan. There was nothing good that I have to say about how those events unfolded.
Trump shot, 2 people seriously injured, 1 killed by a would-be assassin's bullet.
There was blood, there was a lot of it, but there was also pieces of skull fragment, pieces of brain matter.
How did the Secret Service leave a building in Trump's line of sight unsecured?
If anything, the building should have been blocked off and somebody should have been positioned on that roof.
If you see a guy with a rifle pointed at a former president, that should be good enough, shouldn't it?
Not in the state of Pennsylvania, Harvey.
How were agents oblivious to people who saw the gunman long before he began firing?
We look over to our left and spot a guy on the roof. And then we saw the gun.
And what about the shooter? Why did he do it?
I was Thomas Crook's guidance counselor, and I really do believe something evil happened, and I believe something snapped in his head.
This attempted assassination has created chaos in the Secret Service, in the election, and in the lives of those who are at the rally and will never be the same.
This was the most traumatic experience of my life, and I would not wish this experience upon any other person.
TMZ presents Under Fire, the Trump assassination attempt.
Butler, Pennsylvania, it tends to be a place that politicians rarely show up in, of either party. My name is Selena Zito. I'm the national political reporter for the Washington Examiner. I was covering the Trump rally in Butler, Pennsylvania. There was this real sense of excitement, pride, feeling seen, but also just localism. You know, someone is coming to their town.
Well, it is a hot day out here in Butler, Pennsylvania, but it doesn't matter in this swing state for the voters or former President Trump, who just arrived here in his motorcade.
It was very hot, probably at least 92, 93 degrees, and people started to feel that heat. That didn't impact their enthusiasm.
Please welcome the next President of the United States, President Donald J. Trump.
The music comes out, Lee Greenwood, he comes out. He faces all of them. He walks around the runway. He gets to the podium, and there are the masses, right? There's probably a couple thousand in the bleachers, but the masses are sort of in the pasture, and people go crazy.
This is a big crowd. This is a big, big, beautiful crowd.
And President Trump pulls a chart out onto this sort of Jumbotron. And I thought, well, this is different. I remember him saying, and this part, this chart isn't even that, there's more. If you look over here, he turns his neck, he never turns his neck. The second he turns his neck, I hear pop, pop, pop.
Take a look at what happened.
At that moment, I knew exactly what it was.
Take a look at what happened.
Good evening. We are coming on the air with breaking news. There has been an incident at Donald Trump's Pennsylvania rally. It appears shots have apparently been fired and Donald Trump has been injured.
You see him grab his ear. He goes down on the ground. He doesn't fall. He just ducks. I hear someone yell, "Duck." I'm still standing at that point. I hear pop, pop, pop again. At the same time that I see him surrounded in a protective stance by the Secret Service. I see blood on his face, in his ear.
I thought it was like a cap gun, and my son's like, "Gun, get down!" And next thing you know, everybody around us was down.
It sounded like Secret Service or somebody started returning fire because it was like automatic, boom, 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 going. And then everybody hit the ground.
Shots have rung out at a rally where President Trump was addressing the crowd. The scene has been described as chaotic.
We're still just feet away from the president. We can hear everything that's being said between him and the Secret Service. There are 4 more pops at the time that he gets surrounded and I go to the ground.
What were the Secret Service saying?
Well, first they're telling him down, down. And then I hear them talking back and forth about, we got him. And at first I'm like, wait a minute, does that mean they got Trump? Like, you know, it was very confusing. What made me think, no, Trump wasn't down for good, because the caliber of the gun of the second 4 shots was definitely a heavier sound.
The shooter at the Trump rally was killed by the U.S. Secret Service.
He was shot and killed.
He was shot and killed.
This was not a self-inflicted.
This was not a self-inflicted wound, so this is new, critical information.
So in other words, what you're saying is the shooter had one type of gun, an AR. The Secret Service, the sharpshooters, had a more powerful weapon, and you could distinguish between the two as they were firing at the shooter.
Yeah, and as soon as those last 4 pops were done, they're like,
"Are we good? Shooter's down. Are we good to move? We're clear. Let's move. Let's move."
And I hear Trump saying something about his shoes. I need my shoes.
Get that son of a bitch. Let me get my shoes. Let me get my shoes. Let me get my shoes. I got you, sir. I got you, sir. Let me get my shoes. Hold on, your head.
And I hear him say, USA. And they're going, okay, we're getting up, sir, we're getting up. And he says, fight, 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 fight.
My name is Greg Smith. I was one of the first people to see the shooter on the roof at the President Trump rally, July 13th. Straight ahead of us, you can see the building that we were kind of standing beside a big tree. It's a 2-story building. The building to the right of it that we're looking at, which would be the closest building to the stage, that's the one that the shooter actually crawled on top of. I got up there probably 20 minutes before President Trump had arrived. We were all standing there having a good time. There were about 25 or 35 of us in our party down here, standing there for a while. And that's when, you know, probably 5 minutes into President Trump speaking, that's when we noticed the law enforcement officers kind of running around the building, or at least officer, and then, you know, the one in front of it. But we had, you know, at that point noticed like, hey, something, you know, they're looking for someone or whatever. So then we start looking around, and then we look over to our left and spot guy on the roof, kind of going down to a prone position and then just kind of crawling up the roof for about 2 minutes. We're pointing at him, yelling to anyone who, you know, any law enforcement officer around, hey, there's a guy on the roof.
Right there, see him? He's laying down, see him?
Yeah, he's laying down.
And son, I'm here with you fighting like hell to get a Senate.
What's happening?
And to make sure we take back the White House, because if we do, we're going to make America better than ever before. We're going to make it.
Yeah, look, there he is.
because we have millions and millions of people in our country that shouldn't be here. Dangerous people, criminals. We have criminals. We have drug dealers. We have people that should not be here. On the roof.
At that point, none of us knew he had a gun. We knew there was a guy on the roof. Obviously didn't look like he belonged there. He was wearing, obviously not some sort of official uniform. He was in like muted clothes, like tans and grays. Just not something you expect to see crawling on the roof of a presidential rally. He was very out of the ordinary. And then we saw the gun.
He's going down!
At some point, he either repositioned or kind of rolled over a little bit, but the gun kind of flung up in the air. And my son was standing there too, and that we both at the same time were like, he's got a rifle, he's got a gun. I mean, I hear choruses of people yelling, he's got a gun. We're yelling, hey, he's got a gun on the roof.
And you know, that's a little bit... He's going down!
We were yelling very loudly, and there were some women that were really yelling loudly, because I can even still hear them in my ear. You know, I was waving and pointing, but I can't say for sure who or what picked up on it, but I have a hard time believing that someone didn't hear it, because we were not quiet about it. And people start scrambling. There's running, people were already starting to run, and that was 20 to 30 seconds probably, estimating, before the first shot. I mean, people were already starting to scramble, so it was getting pretty chaotic. I mean, once that gun popped up in the air, everyone was pretty freaked out at that point. I mean, it was unfathomable to me. Like, I couldn't believe what was going on, and I was, the whole time, still hearing Trump speak.
And you know, that's a little bit old, that chart. That chart's a couple of months old, and if
I was kind of floored by the whole thing. I can't say that I saw too much urgency. I only noticed the one law enforcement agent who was running around close to the building. That was really the only one I had noticed at the time. And I didn't see him radioing anybody. I didn't see him trying to call for backup or anything. As I'm standing and pointing, which is pretty much what I did the whole time, and yelling like he's on the roof, I'm thinking in my head the whole time, I can't believe I'm still hearing President Trump talk. Like, why am I still hearing him talk? I was absolutely 100% shocked that I still heard him, because just the amount of time, like in that moment, I mean, it felt like, guys, it felt like, 30 minutes that we were pointing at this guy on the roof, even though it was only, 2 minutes or whatever. And I'm just thinking, any minute now, any second now, I'm gonna start hearing shots. And then we heard the shots. It was an unbelievable moment.
probably 20 million people. And you know, that's...
I have a lot of frustration. I mean, there were several nights after this that I didn't get 20 minutes of sleep. Just replaying this whole thing in my head and just thinking, how could this happen? You know, with all the warnings, with all the people yelling out, you know, it was really unbelievable to me that for minutes, this guy kind of wormed his way up a roof and got a shot at the former president of the United States. Like, it extremely frustrating.
Pennsylvania State Police say 2 people were injured in the shooting. 57-year-old David Dutch from New Kensington, PA, a Marine according to the Marine Corps League of Pennsylvania, and 74-year-old James Copenhaver of Moon Township. Father and husband and Buffalo Township firefighter, 50-year-old Corey Comparator, was killed in the shooting.
My name is Dr. Jim Sweetland. I'm an emergency department physician. Unfortunately, I was at the Trump rally. I was a physician that was attending to the firefighter who had a fatal wound to his head, Corey Comparator.
My name is Rico Elmore. I was at the rally because I am the vice chairman of the Republican Party of Beaver County. I'm also a 15-year service member in the Air National Guard. And that's where I learned, the trauma care. And I attended Corey Comparator in his moment of tragedy.
3 shots rang out, and they were pops. I thought at first they were firecrackers. There was a 2 to 3 second pause, and then there was 4 more pops. It was at that point the crowd and myself realized this was gunfire. I heard a woman cry out. She cried out saying, "He's been shot, he's down." At that point, a voice came to me, and I thought many days about this voice, but for me, I think it was God telling me to do something. Everybody at that point was sheltering, and that's why I climbed over them to go down to Corey.
I turned around towards the direction of those shots and looked up into the stands and heard someone yelling for a medic. I grabbed my water bottle, I took my tie off, and I ran towards the area that Corey was in. I kept telling everybody to stay down, get down, stay down. I met with a phenomenal doctor who was already on the scene trying to help as best as he could.
It was obvious Corey had suffered a gunshot wound to his head. It was above his right ear.
There was blood. There was a lot of it, but there was also pieces of skull fragment. There was also pieces of brain matter and skin. We had to actually pick up Corey from the bleachers because as we found out, he was protecting and shielding his family, and he had been wedged between the bleachers. So we picked him up, turned him over. There was a towel that I had used to hold pressure on the wound because if we can hold pressure on it, we would slow down the bleeding process.
You're administering CPR. At what point do you realize it's futile?
In the field, you don't realize it's ever futile.
And there was a moment that I look at the doctor, he looks back at me, and we're just, without words, we look at each other and you know that we have to keep going. Regardless of the outcome, we have to keep going. And that's, by the grace of God, we kept doing what we had to do.
I turned and looked around, and I assume it was his wife and one of his daughters looking at me, and I realized I was performing CPR at their feet on Corey. I'll never forget the look on their face. I've had the privilege of attending to people when they've been dying in the emergency department. And the look on their face was that of horror, but it also was a little bit of hope. And the only thing I could say to him, I blurred out, he's going to get the help he needs.
The shock and the look in her eyes was just unimaginable. You can see in the eyes of the wife and the individuals that were around Corey that they were scared, they were panicked. You can see the color drain from their faces. You can see the tears in their eyes.
It's such a horrifying thing that you're sitting there with somebody and the next second they're dead.
They had to witness their loved one who only moments ago, they were clapping, they were cheering, they were full of joy. To have the life taken away as a family member, I can only imagine seeing that happen. As I have a daughter, I can only imagine the fear that was in their minds and in their eyes. You can just see the panic.
You ran over to him seconds after the shots were fired. It must have occurred to you those shots could have continued and that you could have yourself been in the line of fire running over to him. Is that something you processed, thought about?
I truthfully didn't think about it. I truthfully had, it was more go, what are you waiting for? And I didn't really think about the fact I was going to get shot. It just occurred in my mind.
I only did what I trained to always do, and that is to serve and protect the people, and I know the doctor did the same thing.
Then I felt a tap on my shoulder. I was being tapped out. And I turned to see probably the two biggest Pennsylvania State Troopers I've ever seen. And the guy said, "We got this." They picked up Corey like a paperweight. And I gotta tell you, I've never seen anybody get evacuated in that condition off a grandstand as quickly as these guys took him down. There's EMS with the stretcher down at the bottom, and they got Corey right on the stretcher and got him out.
You're a doctor, you've seen a lot in your many years of practice. Is this different than the other cases you've handled at the hospital?
It is different. This was raw. This was me providing initial care for someone who's down in the field. I think God guided me.
This was the most traumatic experience of my life, and I would not wish this experience upon any other person. My heart cries out. My condolences are for the family and those who were injured in this as well. I just feel that I just hope this never happens again.
In the wake of the assassination attempt, loved ones are remembering Corey Comparator, a father and volunteer firefighter killed during Saturday's rally.
He was a good guy. He really was. You know, you hear stories all the time that it's always the good ones that end up getting taken out, and unfortunately, that's what happened.
Truly a good, God-fearing, hard-working man, loved his family. This was the last thing that this man ever deserved.
When we talk about inches, that the former President Trump came within inches of dying, that is not an exaggeration. That is facts.
As he moves his head right to the right, he is shot in the right ear. And you talk about an instance of millimeters, of centimeters, of a very small amount of space.
We were a half an inch away from civil war. We were a head not turning from a civil war after the assassination attempt.
I've probably covered at least 50 rallies. He never turns his head. He always faces the crowd.
Your point is, had he not turned his head, that bullet may have gone into his brain.
Had he either been standing forward or turning his body, which he always does, and I talked to him the next day about that, had he done what he usually does, what he always does, what he has done forever, he'd be dead. It would have either gone through him this way or through the back of his head, but he would be dead. There were so many things he did in those succession of seconds that he never does. And when he called me the next morning, he and I both talked about it a lot.
Tell me about the conversation.
Before I even said, hello, Mr. President, I think I said, hello, Mr. And he said, Selena, are you okay? Is your daughter, Shannon and Michael, are they okay? I'm so sorry that I didn't get to do the interview with you. I think I swore. Which is not like me, but I think I said, are you bleeping kidding me? You were just shot, I'm fine. And so he called me several times that day. I believe it was 5 or 7. And we talked a lot about what you were asking about. And so I said to him, Mr. President, I have been covering you forever. I know your relationship with the voters. Why did you turn your head? And why'd you put the chart out there? And he said, I don't know. I said, is that God? He said, that's God. He said, had I not done things I have never done before, I'd be gone. It was when he said that, he said to me, it's changed everything. It's changed me.
In order to see the chart, I started to, like this, turn to my right and was ready to begin a little bit further turn, which I'm very lucky I didn't do, when I heard a loud whizzing sound and felt something hit me really, really hard on my right ear. I said to myself, wow, what was that? It can only be a bullet.
Did he say anything about the pain of getting shot, about what he thought happened? Did he paint a picture for you of that moment?
Yeah, he said, it really hurts. At one point he said, 1 centimeter, my head would have been a watermelon, just blown up.
We broke a story on the website an hour or so after the shooting that we have a source who was in direct contact with the Secret Service, and they said 3 things. They said 2 people were in the hospital. Nobody knew 2 were in, so that checked out. The second thing was the Secret Service shot and killed the shooter. That had not been out that the Secret Service did it. The third thing we were told, and this came from the Secret Service, is that Trump wasn't hit by a bullet.
Right.
He was hit by broken glass.
Right, that one of the bullets had broken glass somewhere, and that's what actually struck his ear and caused the bleeding. And then shortly after that, you know, you had former President Trump coming out saying that he had been struck by a bullet that ripped through his ear.
As did his doctor.
Dr. Ronnie Jackson said that also.
You know, it's just interesting to me that the recon we got, 2 of the things we knew were right. Why would the Secret Service just say that? Again, these are sources, but this was somebody clearly high up in the Secret Service. We know that. And why would they say it was broken glass? That seems odd unless they knew something.
Yeah.
With respect to former President Trump, there's some question about whether or not it's a bullet or shrapnel that hit his ear.
Former President Donald Trump was not happy with that remark, posting on Truth Social, quote, "There was no glass, there was no shrapnel. The hospital called it a bullet wound to the ear, and that is what it was. No wonder the once storied FBI has lost the confidence of America."
The FBI has identified the suspected shooter as 20-year-old Thomas Matthew Crooks. According to court records, he did not have a criminal history.
The FBI director revealing that the gunman had looked up how far Lee Harvey Oswald was from John F. Kennedy.
The shooter was searching for information on his devices on both President Biden and former President Trump.
Thomas was a quiet young man, typical teenager in high school, a very intelligent young man, a man who pretty much stayed to himself, a pretty typical teenage high school student.
And it's going to say GPIO falling, so that's basically going to detect if the signal is decreasing.
My name is Jim Knapp. I was Thomas Crooks' guidance counselor from his sophomore year through his senior year.
Thomas Crooks.
He did have a few friends. I mean, he wasn't just a loner out there, just like anybody else would. But not a huge friend group, wasn't like the most popular person in the class or anything like that.
He was real smug and arrogant whenever he was talking, and whether that was his way to try to make friends or be funny, I don't know, but it got under my skin a lot.
He was quiet, but whenever he was asked a question, he was always very polite about it. He knew what he was talking about, and so it was never something that he was rude to teachers. Like, my history teacher loved him, and my history teacher was a great person. I never doubt his judgment, so, you know, that was what was shocking for me, was seeing someone who had been seen as such a good person in class have this outcome. It was just a shock to me.
The shooter looked up how to make explosives online and also looked up both the location and time of the Democratic National Convention as well as future Trump rallies.
Were there any red flags with him?
No, there were not. And I can honestly tell you, as I thought of that early Sunday morning when I got the text from my former high school principal, what do I remember about Thomas Crooks? And I had to think long and hard, because it was very hard for me to remember, because there wasn't very much. He was, again, a quiet young man who went through high school doing what he had to do. He took honors classes, he took AP classes, and he was very successful in that. But where I really saw him was in the cafeteria. So what would happen is I would go down during the lunch period and I would talk to him and other students. And I did see him down there, and he did sit by himself for a period of time because there were no other friends that he had during that lunch period. And I would say, you know, would you like to have someone else to sit with you? And he pretty much said, no, thank you, Mr. Knapp. I'll just sit here by myself, and did a fine job with that.
But that's kind of interesting, that makes him sound like a loner.
Yeah, you could say that, but being a loner versus isolating himself, I think, you know, are kind of different.
Stop.
Yeah, for ladies.
He was like a kid that was always alone. He was always bullied every day. He was just an outcast. Like, you could look at him and you would be like, something's a little off. That's how I could describe it.
His recent internet searches included, in April of 2024, he searched major depressive disorder and depressive crisis.
There are students who say that he had been taunted and even bullied. Do you know anything about that?
I can truly say to you, in my opinion, I was not aware of any bullying that was going on. If that would occur in 2021, 22, in those years, bullying was really a big issue across the nation because of COVID. We had a hotline that allowed us, I think it was called Safe to Say. It allowed kids to anonymously call and talk about a bullying situation, talk about anything. And there were no records or no conversations that brought up Thomas's name.
You know, it's interesting. There are students at the school who have wildly varying impressions of him. Some say what you said, and there are others who said he was arrogant. Some say he was very politically charged. Can you speak to that? I mean, it's just interesting that as these other students surface, they're giving very different impressions of him.
I would love to address that. Harvey, what I'm looking at when I think about Thomas, I'm thinking about a young man who was a quiet young man. Politically speaking, I never talked to him about politics. I never saw him wear a t-shirt regarding politics.
It was shocking because, I mean, it's shocking to hear someone from your high school, you know, that you knew of, would do something as tragic as that.
It must be almost surreal for you to juxtapose the person you knew with what you have now seen happen on that Saturday.
Absolutely, Harvey. I mean, I'm thinking of a young man who just went through high school and he got through day in and day out and did what he had to do to be a success. And then I turn around and I think about it 2 years later, something happened. And I really do believe, Harvey, something evil happened. And I believe something snapped in his head, because in the 3 years that I was involved with him, I never saw any traits of that kind. And I really believe these last 2 years really made the difference. And I think that's what happened. He snapped and evil got to him.
Interesting that the last part of his high school career was COVID related. You were teaching remotely, and that was difficult for a lot of kids. And so I know it's speculation, but that kind of isolation can change people.
I believe that the mental health area after COVID really kicked in. I mean, we had it beforehand, there is no doubt about it. But after COVID, kids were really feeling the effects of being home and alone. And a big part that we had during COVID was a program that the federal government funded. And a lot of schools were able to go out and get social workers and mental health therapists. However, now that that federal money is gone, those social workers and those mental health therapists are going to be very difficult to replace because the money's not there.
The assassination attempt of former President Donald Trump on July 13th is the most significant operational failure of the Secret Service in decades, and I am keeping him and his family in my thoughts.
The gunman is believed to have flown a drone around the Pennsylvania rally site ahead of time in an apparent attempt to scope out the site before the event. That is according to a law enforcement official.
Secret Service Director Kimberly Cheadle has resigned her post. It comes 24 hours after her blistering hearing in front of the House Oversight Committee investigating the attempted assassination of Donald Trump.
My name is Richard Staropoli, and I was the assistant to the special agent in charge in the New York field office at the U.S. Secret Service.
Take a look at what happened.
I evaluated that event as it unfolded as a total breakdown in communication, a total failure for the Secret Service, a total lack of a cohesive, coherent, and competent security plan. There was nothing good that I have to say about how those events unfolded.
Move his hair. Hold. When you're ready. On you. Ready. Move. Up. Move. Go. Hawkeye's here.
My name is Cheryl Tyler, and I was a special agent with the United States Secret Service. I know what it takes to plan an event, whether it's an indoor event or an outside event. I know the preparations. Everything that I've seen, they did textbook.
Yeah, look, there he is.
The shooter was less than 150 yards from where Trump was, on a building with a clear line of sight. Nobody was on that roof. If you're going to protect a former president, to me, there's no more important place than there. I cannot wrap my head around this.
You shouldn't have to wrap your head around that, right? What went on there was pure negligence and incompetence. I have done 50 or 60 sites to secure the visits for the President of the United States, both domestically and abroad. And every one of those sites, whether I'm doing them or any other competent agent who's assigned to the Presidential Protective Division is doing them, starts and ends the same way. You stand at the proverbial X behind the podium, or where the podium will be, and you look out in front of you and you say, hey, if I can see that in front of me, that can see me. And that's where you begin your security plan.
wasn't that building within the perimeter that should be secured. Do we agree with that?
The building was outside of the perimeter on the day of the visit, but again, that is one of the things that during the investigation we want to take a look at and determine whether or not other decisions should have been made.
You cannot overlook a building that provides high ground cover with direct line of sight. And I don't want to hear about the semantics game where maybe there was a tree branch in the way that obfuscated the view so it wasn't 100% pure line of sight. That rooftop needs to be posted.
I was talking to another former colleague of mine. If anything, the building should have been blocked off, taped off, whatever, and somebody, even if they were just to sit on the roof, they should have been positioned on that roof.
The Secret Service has insinuated that it was the job of local law enforcement to secure that building. My understanding, because they felt it was outside the perimeter. So there seems to be finger pointing going back and forth there.
Total nonsense, right? When the Secret Service shows up to provide a protective detail to whether it's the sitting president of the United States or former President Trump or any protectee of the Secret Service, it is the Secret Service's inherent responsibility to secure that site. There is no valid reason for you to give that up and say, no, it's the responsibility of the local police department. If it's the responsibility of the local police department, why is the Secret Service there at all?
That building in particular has a sloped roof at its highest point, and so, there's a safety factor that would be considered there, that we wouldn't want to put somebody up on a sloped roof, and so, the decision was made to secure the building from inside.
I've seen the comments from the director of the Secret Service about the slope of the roof. Think about what the job of the counter snipers is. It's to identify, locate, and kill someone who's a threat to the President of the United States. Do you think those guys are concerned about climbing up on a roof that's 10 feet above the ground that may have a slight incline to it? Absolutely ridiculous. Inexcusable that there was no one on the roof of that building.
My name's Tim Miller, and I'm a career federal agent and former Secret Service agent. I was assigned to President Clinton's detail. The outer perimeter should include all viable threats at that site. And so whatever happened in that process, that building, at a minimum, should have been included in the perimeter and posted and ensure that nobody could get up on that. That was a gaping hole.
When you say posted, you mean posting a Secret Service agent on the roof?
Yeah, and it doesn't have to be a Secret Service agent. Remember, we work with partners, law enforcement partners. There are not enough Secret Service agents to go around, but if you had those two tactical guys that were in the second floor posted up on the roof, that would have been a win. And we don't care about slanted roofs. We don't care about temperature.
You have got to be kidding me. They couldn't put agents on the roof because it was sloped. My driveway has a bigger slope than that roof. And it's funny how, the Secret Service agents had no trouble navigating that dangerous slope when they were on the roof after the gunman had shot Donald Trump in the side of the head. There they are on that dangerous roof. Call workplace health and safety.
Basically a cliff. The whole situation with the building, that's going to be dissected and has been dissected and it will continue to be dissected as to why no one from the Secret Service was either on that building or had someone placed on that building. That is going to be the question forever.
The shooter was flagged as suspicious more than an hour before he opened fire on the former President Donald Trump, raising more questions about the security lapses at that rally.
He was never located by an agent?
To my knowledge, that individual was not located by an agent.
We have dozens of rally goers who have identified him, and not one agent on the ground. There are many, many, many agents on the ground. Local law enforcement, Secret Service. No one was able to identify him and have sights on and see him.
What I'm saying is that the agents that were on the ground at the time, I have no knowledge that they were able to interview him or locate him.
Thank you.
So let's get into Thomas Crooks for a minute. This is somebody that they knew might be up to no good, clearly, because they said it, and yet they lost track of this guy. That seems to be a lapse.
You can't put a person in a bubble completely. You could have that event. Now, I mean, and I'm not being sarcastic about it. You could have that event, you could have that outdoor event and have nobody allowed to come in. And then it would be safe because nobody's there.
I get what you're saying, but what if, would it be protocol when you see somebody suspicious like that, forgetting about following him, what about walking up to him and asking him questions just to satisfy yourself?
What are you going to ask him? What is your objective in talking to that person to ask them what are they doing?
In the Secret Service, we're proactive. It's all about making it not happen. How can you assess body language? How can you assess words that are spoken? How can you assess how he's dressed, how he appears, how he comes across to determine whether or not he's a threat if you don't talk to him? And some basic questions I would have, if in fact I went, would have been, hey, how you doing? What are you doing with a rangefinder today? Tell me about where you're from. Just talking to him so that I can begin to see indicators that maybe he's deceptive, mentally ill, or even violent.
I was up at the fence line, saw the guy move from roof to roof, told an officer that he was on the roof. The officer come looking, I went back to where I was standing, heard that there was somebody that could see the person, so I went back to where they were standing, saw the person, went back and told the officer again that if he goes back to that particular spot, he can see the person, figuring that he would go in radio.
Any Secret Service agent, any police officer, hell, any citizen that would raise a concern, the decision at that point should have been made, you know what? We're either going to take President Trump and leave the venue, or we're going to hold him in that armored vehicle or whatever holding room we've got set up. But we're not bringing him out on stage. Talk about a poor decision.
My name is Michael DeGuss, and former Secret Service agent. Served under President Trump. The inner perimeter did their job. You saw on a global stage on news the bullets fly right by Trump and nick his ear and all that stuff, and in seconds those guys and women, they did exactly what they're trained to do and supposed to do.
In my layman's view, one is they could have shot at this guy. Second, they could have screamed, "Get Trump down on the ground now," if they felt there was a clear and present danger because they saw what was going on. So even if they didn't shoot, somebody could have screamed that, certainly one of the counter snipers, and the other agents could have basically rushed Trump and got him to the ground.
So, one, you're not a Secret Service agent, and I used to be at the top of the game. I'm going to tell you here, if the communication doesn't get from local or state law enforcement to the team on the ground at the stage fast enough, if there's not a symbiotic, cohesive communication between this, meaning service and protection flows, it ebbs and flows. If the information is found, you pitch it or catch it. You don't ever sit on it, ever.
Yeah, someone's on top of the roof. Look. There he is right there.
They saw a guy with a rifle. That should be good enough, shouldn't it, to scream,
Not in the state of Pennsylvania, Harvey. You're in an open carry state, allowed to carry a gun outside of a secure spot inside of a zone and walk around.
Why does the shooter have to literally get to the point of pointing the gun at the former president before they realize it's a threat?
You want me to just shoot him because he's got a gun?
If there's a gun and a guy on a roof and he's not a police officer, to me, the common sense thing is scream, "Get Trump on the ground or get Trump out of here now." That's what I would think somebody would scream. It just seems common sense to me.
But I think in the world of safety and protection, you have to take in a lot of stuff, digest it, and assess it in seconds or a fraction of that and make a decision.
How do I know factually, intentionally, what you are getting ready to do? I don't. If you had killed that potential shooter, because that's what it would have been at that time, then you can be able to stand up in court and not be crucified and sent off to jail for a murder, not an attempt, a murder, because you have no proof that that was what he was getting ready to do.
Was it a failure? No. I understand the tragedies that occurred at that site with somebody dying and losing their life and the injuries, but a protectee of the United States Secret Service is alive. At the end of the day, that's a win.
USA! 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 We like the devil!
Do you think the Secret Service is generally up to par these days in protecting the protectees?
Nowhere near it. And I've had this discussion with plenty of former agents. When I first started 20 years ago, the Secret Service was about 1,000 agents, about 10% women, and most of these folks were either military veterans or had come from another federal agency or a police department and had some sort of resume that showed that they were capable of performing at the level at which you would expect a Secret Service agent to function at. Today, they're hiring people fresh out of school who have no job whatsoever. This is not somebody's first-time job. You want to dress nice, wear a nice suit. You know what? Become a cruise director, not a Secret Service agent. You know, I am not 6'3". If I'm assigned to the president's detail and the boss comes to me and says, hey, Rich, the president's 6'3", I can't put you on this shift. We need taller guys. Do I like that answer? I don't like that answer, but I'm professional enough to understand why he wants to do that. I don't turn around and sue the government and force them to give me that job just for optics. If I'm one of the supervisors, I don't just acquiesce to someone because I need to present a better picture, but that's what happens here at the Secret Service, and that's what's going on.
You had mentioned that when you were serving, 10% of the Secret Service force was comprised of women. And then you said that there are people for various reasons who shouldn't be assigned details but are for optics. Are you suggesting that there were women there who should not have been?
That's exactly what I'm suggesting. If I gave you a large hat and I put the name of every Secret Service agent in that hat, I'd bet the house that the first 200 or so names you pulled out of that hat are going to be men. That's just because of the ratio of men to women at the Secret Service. You explain to me how all of a sudden the shift that's afforded the protective detail to President Trump, not former President Trump, half of those people are women. That is a conscious decision that was made purely for optics purposes. And I'm not saying that there aren't women that can do that job. I've worked with plenty of them. Get me 3 that are up to the task of doing that job. I can't have 3 women that are no taller than 5.5 feet so that when something happens, and the whole world saw what happened, when President Trump finally stands up, what do we see? Everything from chest up is exposed again, simply because the agents assigned to the shift weren't tall enough to provide the cover that needed to be there to evacuate him safely off that stage. They put him into just as much danger as if they weren't there at all.
Wait.
I've worked with women in the Marine Corps, in the police department, and in the Secret Service. As a matter of fact, some of the women I worked with in the Secret Service were outstanding in every way. So it is never about the sex or the particular category that they want. It's about capability. It's about the ability for a woman or man, and by the way, if a 5'7" man was there, it wouldn't have been any different. He still would have been short. But the reality is it does bring up a question. Should we be saying that you have to be taller than 5'10"? Should that be a requirement? Because here's what we know. We can no longer afford to compromise the mission of the Secret Service to adjust to certain folks that want to be included. It has to be merit-based.
I know guys on the job as agents that have been shorter than the existing presidents. The criteria for you as an agent is to be able to take out the enemy. That's your job. If I take a pipe, bust your kneecap, take a gun, shoot you, you're done. Over. That's my job. If you're gonna stand there and measure every person and not just women, I know a lot of guys that are not even 6 foot tall that are agents. So to play the numbers game and to take us back 50 years, not a part of the game. I'm not gonna play that.
USA! 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 USA!
President Kennedy died at 1 p.m. Central Standard Time.
Senator Robert Francis Kennedy died at 1:44 a.m. June 6, 1968.
I turned around quickly, and the next thing I saw was Malcolm falling back in a dead faint.
The Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King, 39 years old and a Nobel Peace Prize winner, and the leader of the nonviolent civil rights movement in the United States, was assassinated in Memphis tonight.
A young woman pointed a gun at point-blank range at President Gerald Ford as he walked through a large crowd of well-wishers.
Shortly after 1:30, that's when a gunman opened fire on Ronald Reagan.
There are people, even former Secret Service agents, who I've spoken with, who have said, if someone wants to get at a protectee badly enough, and they're willing to give up their life to do it, it's hard to stop that. Is that true?
It's incredibly hard to stop that, right? What's stopping someone from running out of that wood line with a suicide vest on, keeps running, you know, maybe he takes a few shots, but he gets close enough to detonate. But you can't go into an event thinking that. You're going into the event with that idea in your head to begin with, then you're doomed to fail. You've got to go into the event, how am I going to stop that from happening? How am I going to minimize the possibility that that happens? What do I need to do to provide the maximum level of security so that doesn't happen? And let me tell you this, it's not just that I go into the site or the venue with the idea of protecting the president. I'm going into that venue or site with the idea of protecting the thousands of people, American citizens, that are going to show up with their families to see the protectee at that event. And that's what motivates you, and that's the approach you need to take. Doing it the other way, you might as well not show up at all.
Another challenge, recruitment and retention, something all law enforcement is struggling with. But the Secret Service's departure rate was 48% last year, due in part to the high demands of the job.
That should be the best and the brightest that are there. It should be America's heroes, period, end of discussion. They belong on a pedestal to me. The absolute honor of a lifetime. But as you now start to do the job and you have other priorities that start outside of the job occurring, mortgage payments, families, missing birthdays, Christmases, all the stuff, you can take a look and go, I could go to ATF, I could go to the IRS, I can go anywhere else and make the same paycheck that I'm making as a Secret Service agent. Why would I do that? I could work Monday through Friday, take home car. And so guys start having outside influence on their careers and say, wait a minute, this is quality of life problem now. I volunteered for this, a family maybe didn't. It becomes problematic. The next problem on this for the budget
can I stop
you're
you on
talking
that
about.
point?
Sure.
There are two different things at play. One is if the agency isn't properly funded so that you can't hire enough people, what you seem to be getting at is there is significant attrition just because the job is so hard, and that the attrition is the reason you're understaffed, which is different than the budget.
Well, there's two. There's two. Attrition is a big problem for the service. End of discussion. Absolutely a problem with attrition. Budgets become problematic when you start stretching too thin. You start having a lot of protectees, a lot of sites, and you don't have, because of high rates of attrition, it's not a level balance, Harvey.
Can you explain why your agency was so poorly rated and why so many staff left in just 1 year?
So with all due respect, I dispute the statistic of half of the employees leaving in 2022. I think that has been inaccurate data that's been reported out there. But what I can tell you is, as I have returned as the director of the agency, we have had an increase in hiring and staffing and an increase in resources. And we are committed to continue to hire so that we can be staffed appropriately to meet the dynamic mission that we have.
When Secret Service originally was under Treasury, they were their own agency under that one umbrella. Funding was never a problem to secure. When they became part of Homeland Security, they became part of every other federal agency that's under that umbrella that's fighting for the same bucket of money.
They never mention our crowds. Like this crowd. Look at this crowd.
I heard a story where they said, well, will they stop having outdoor events? I don't see that coming. Will they make changes with outdoor events? Yes. Public officials like to be around the people. It is a scary situation to be in crowds like that, but that's part of your job. And you have to figure out how to make sure everybody stays alive. Will things be changed? Yes, they've already been changed. Every time, and I'll say this as a positive thing for the service, because they haven't had many fatalities or close fatalities in the history of the organization, is that they will make the changes and make the necessary changes that need to take place so something like that doesn't happen again.
Take a look at what happened